Hello all, I'm Bruce Reyes-Chow. Welcome to the first full episode of the RCP Family podcast. My co-host for this show is Robin Pugh, my wife of 28 years and co-author of our book, Rule Number 2, Don't Be an Asshat, an official handbook for raising parents and children. If you're watching this on YouTube, Robin is now holding that book up. And she's also the co-creator of our three children, Ev, Abby, and Annie. So, hey, Rob, sitting next to me at the kitchen table. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
We just sounded like an NPR SNL skit. It's dying for a sweaty balls reference right now.
No.
I slipped in. There you go. All right, so a lot of people, for whatever reasons, know a little bit about me, and so in my travels, I get to go around, but a lot of folks actually don't know who you are, Rob. I think they know you exist. You're a real person, but haven't met you. So who is Robin? Can you just give a little bit of like where you were born, a little bit of background, just quick 30-second intro?
All right. Well, I was not born in California, but I'm a Californian. Grew up going to school in San Jose, California, fled the suburbs for the city, lived here in San Francisco for the last 30 years. My career path has been circuitous, but I've ended up for the last 20 years or so being a teacher of one kind or another, and right now I teach at City College of San Francisco.
Great. Awesome. And Rob and I have been living in San Francisco for, 30-ish years. We fell in love as I was a teenager. Robin was not. We met in Louisville, Kentucky, and if you are a Presbyterian, you know that that's like the Mecca for us. We met at this cheesy hotel at a college event, and there's lots of stories about our life and romance, but we'll leave that for another show. So we're doing this podcast, Rob. Crazy. So what are you most excited about, and what are your biggest trepidations? Besides mocking your husband.
That's not mocking.
That's not mocking. That's just laughing at you.
Just laughing. I don't know. This is a new adventure for me. I haven't done this before. I guess my greatest trepidation is that I have something to say worth listening to.
There you go. And you're on video. So I will say that the family didn't realize they'd be on video as well as audio. And the video is just more of a behind the scenes. So everybody does have to be dressed in print and all that. And there you go. So I know that was the worry. But all right. So as you all know, listeners, this first episode, we'll kind of break it down in the normal way. We'll do our shows. We'll do a current issue, and then we'll do a little parenting thing and talk about some other stuff. When Robin and I are co-hosting, we'll do much more parenting conversations because our children aren't in the room, so we can talk about them. In any case, let's first take a current issue. We were trying to figure out what we wanted to talk about today, and it's in between things that are going on. There's a shutdown going on. There's the Los Angeles teacher strike. But I think I want to think a little more general. A few years ago, we were sitting in our living room watching the elections, and it's seared into my memory as we watched the results start to roll in. And the two girls that were still home, you could see they were devastated. And I remember Annie, our youngest, basically asking, how could this happen? And we're now 2 years later, and Trump is still our president. And we've had to parent through all of this. What's been the hardest part about that for you as their mom, as we're trying to maintain a household, about parenting this time?
What to choose? Sorry. Our dogs are growling at each other. All right. Well, there's a little levity for the moment. There's a lot, but I think probably for me, the biggest thing is just trying to have faith in some idea of normalcy, because we're in a moment that's very much not normal. And I don't know what that means for my children. I don't know what that means for my family. But there's an awful lot that's being threatened right now.
Well, we talk about what has happened is that Trump has moved everything to the right, and so normal and center all get redefined. I mean, we were supporters of Barack Obama, but we didn't think he was like the most left radical progressive person ever, right? I mean, right. There are lots of things he did wrong. So center to him was a place, but now center seems even more right. Like we respect people that they're at least not calling people names. Like, what is that about? I mean, how do we communicate that to our kids? How have you struggled with that, and how have you tried to communicate that?
Yeah. Well, in a way, there isn't a center anymore, right? Because we're so polarized. That's part of the issue. Is that the center is kind of meaningless in this environment. But in a sense, I think as terrifying as it has been, it's also been really, really exciting, because this is a time where I think people see that things are so bad that more people are involved. And my kids have jumped right in, and they see that that's a necessary piece of moving forward and trying to make our society better for all people. And that's really exciting.
Yeah. I mean, I think the center argument can often be a place of privilege where folks want to protect this safe space, and so are not forced into choosing sides. And I think there's that time you have to choose sides and have to kind of come together. But these days, it feels like trying to reach that center means that you give up so much.
Right.
I mean, I'm not willing to have us build that damn wall in exchange for DACA. I mean, so because now we've just given this huge symbolic win for something that's important. And I'm kind of telling people during the shutdown time, just hold on and don't give him anything to say he could win or that he created a deal.
Right. Well, and they had their chance. I mean, I didn't support it, but in previous offers, that's exactly what they were trying to do. And at the time, he was being a toddler and said no. And now he just has to go to his room without supper.
I think that's offending toddlers around the world. So let's just stop that. So I know it's been hard. I too agree with you though. It's been really powerful to see our kids jump into these spaces, and not just in a global political way, but even in their schools, to hear them talk about how they hold space or disrupt space and are in a way making it so people can't forget that there is division. And then by pointing it out, it's a way to get to hopefully something else. Mm-hmm. I remember one of the walkouts, all the other kids had to call their parents. And for us, they were just like, no, you can just go. So, I think I'm going to take a little bit of credit that we have created an atmosphere where they feel like they can go and participate in these things. I mean, did your parents encourage you to be involved politically?
My parents never even talked about anything that would fit. They were never involved in anything politically, and they never talked about or suggested any kind of involvement other than voting. They were always very clear that you should always vote.
Right.
But
So,
no.
so voting was a definite thing, but not necessarily getting involved beyond that.
No,
Well,
I would say, though, I think that's a sign of their generation. Right?
yeah, yeah. Well, unlike my mom, right, who's this liberal Democrat and worked in politics and was surrounded by it, but even that was somewhat of a center space, kind of establishment kind of place. I don't remember us protesting at all, but it was more about just being involved in the system, which I think is shifting as well for people. Well, good. I mean, it's been hard. I know we've personally both, gone through ups and downs and how we're feeling, and I've gained weight during this time. I'm going to blame it on Trump, but I think some of it is we have to reclaim that space. I know for a while we were trying to have people over for dinner, or like, what would you suggest for people to claim that space back, a space of healing, of wholeness, of community?
For me, I think I've been feeling this even more just the past year as we're living through this. I think personally it's just about taking a breath, trying to let go of any kind of sense of panic, even though it's extremely important to be very involved. But letting go of that and taking time to enjoy all of the pleasures, all of the joys that are there in your life. They're there, but you have to take the time to notice them. Just the fresh air walking to work, or something exciting that might happen with a student, or the fresh peaches that were on my dad's peach tree this summer. Just little pieces here and there to remind ourselves how precious life is.
Sounds like a plan. Yeah, I mean, I think it is true. I tried to have a sense of self-care and of community that isn't about abdication or removing yourself from the struggle, but in order to make it through the struggle, we all have to be whole. If we're filled with anger and rage all the time, it just will become overwhelming. So I think we do a pretty good job as a family of laughing and doing things and making sure we're engaged in our whole selves. So well done, us. All right, so let me move on to a different thing. So one of the things that's unique about our relationship is, one, we had a funky wedding and we did things different, and we got married when we were pretty young, and sidebar, my family was not real happy about it because I was really young. All kinds of fun stuff. But when we got married and we're thinking about a family, I mean, I know you didn't particularly want to have tons of kids, or even kids, right?
Mm-mm. I wasn't sure I wanted kids.
And so we waited 6 years, and then I was a hyphenated name, so I'm Reyes-Chow, and then we were trying to think about what do we do with the kids. And you remember that conversation?
Very much.
So what were our issues?
So this was the mid-90s at this point, and so there were more options available to us than perhaps for previous generations. I had some friends that had dealt with this issue through choosing their own communal last name. And so we talked about that. Obviously, there's hyphenating, but you were already hyphenated, so Reyes-Chow Pew just didn't have a ring to it. So I think those are the main two that I remember.
Yeah. We had started, I mean, even when we got married, because you didn't take my name, so hyphenating triple hyphen was not going to work.
Right. And then that was kind of the history of the conversation, was when we were talking about hyphenating, because at the time you were just Chow and I was Pugh, and there's no good way to put those two last names together.
It's like middle school teasing fodder.
Terrible.
And then I do remember us trying to create a brand new name together, and I'm so glad we didn't do that. I can't imagine what that would have been.
If you fully embrace it, I think it would be very sweet, but you were not going to fully embrace it.
We would have been the first Benifer or one of those anyway. And so we ended up with the kids deciding that if we had girls, they would get Robin's last name, and if they had boys, they would get my last name. So then we had Evelyn, and then we had to decide, well, do we rotate now? Because I remember you saying,
well, I wanted to be fair. I felt like I had one. And then, so for the next kid, I could be magnanimous. The next kid could be yours. Well, it wasn't part of the initial plan, but
I think they're all mine.
Well, they're all yours. They're all themselves.
They're all themselves. They all them. And so then we decided. I kind of was like, that's just silly. So, because then you rotate again on the third one, and then you have two, and I have one.
Yeah.
So we didn't do that either. So our finally, so the girls all have Robin's last name. We gave them a Filipino middle name that nobody can ever pronounce. And everybody is always wondering, where's the dad pew? Doesn't exist. And the Reyes-Chow name will die with me. Wah, wah. Well, so sad. But that's how we came up with our names. And we know of at least, do we know one other couple that's done that? Yeah. So if you need ideas about naming when you have different last names, there's one for you. All right.
I still think alternating has some.
Yeah, but 3 and 2, what?
But you never know, right? That's just, you enter into the agreement at the beginning. You might have one.
But then,
you might have 4.
So then one who has your name thinks, I am Mom's, and then the one has my last name.
That's not true. Our kids know they're yours. The name doesn't matter.
Okay. Whose favorite? The one with my last name. No, huh?
No.
The dogs? What are the dogs? I think they have your last name too.
No.
You went to the vet.
No, it's the opposite. They all have your last name.
Oh, they have my last name? Oh.
Yeah. Our dogs are hyphenated.
And right now we have 3 of them in our house, which is a whole other story. So now we're even, apparently. Okay, well, good. There's a naming ditty for you there. One of the things we wanted to talk about today, though, is the issue of elder care and the sandwich generation. Robin's dad, in recent months, his health has declined, and we don't know how much time he has, but we've had to go through in the last month a lot of struggle about care and medical decisions and finances and all of that. And so, I think we want to talk a little bit about how it's been being in this, what they call the sandwich generation, taking care of our parents while we still have kids in the house and we're taking care of them. So, Rob, what's been the hardest thing about this whole past few months with your dad and the whole situation?
Well, I think it's really just kind of the frustration of trying to, not the frustration of trying to balance it, but just the frustration that I can't do everything that's necessary. We're fortunate that our kids are old enough that they mostly can take care of themselves, at least for long periods of time. I don't have a young child that needs me to very carefully watch over them. I can leave my kids at home alone. It would be impossible if I didn't have that. But even so, with you fully supporting and all of that, it's just been a huge demand of time, because obviously we're also still working. So when
Yeah.
my grandmother was in this situation, my dad actually was wonderful with her, but he was retired. So, he brought her home to live with him. She was willing to do that, which my father is not. Um, but it worked out okay. Um, so yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah. You touched on a couple of things that we've had to struggle with, think through. One is that stage of life when you possibly need to shift in the way you leave, the way you live, or where you live. Um, Both your dad and stepmother, we have all felt like it was time for them to move into some kind of assisted living, but they didn't feel like they needed it. We had the conversation about remodeling their home, and they said
Mm-hmm.
they might do it when they need it, and it'd be like, well, that's too late, and back and forth, back and forth. Um, I've had a lot of conversations with people at the church I'm serving about that, and they, the stubborn old, like,
Yeah.
don't tell us when we're ready to, basically they see it as you're putting us out to pasture, and we see it as we want you to be safe. I
Well,
mean,
and not only that, I mean, that's absolutely true. And I want to say, the whole family has wanted my parents to do something else for at least 5 years, probably 10. Um, it feels like this difficult situation has been building and dragging on forever. But in addition to that, one of the frustrating things is, I kind of get it. I get the, I'm going to be strong and independent. That's admirable in a way, but there's a complete lack of recognition that your decisions drag a lot of the rest of us along with you and affect other people very significantly, and you're not taking those needs into consideration at all.
right. And I think there is that balance between what is our obligation to our parents
Mm-hmm.
and what do we wish they would think about as they're making decisions about things. I mean, that tension is, I mean, it's different with every family, but it really does feel like for your dad and stepmom, them not really realizing the circle around them of people who have been worried. um, I think one of the things that the hardest was giving up their independence.
Mm-hmm.
um, what are things that we felt like we tried that were helpful? What were tactics or ways to have conversations that were helpful?
Um, well, one thing, I mean, this seems pretty basic, but it's also really important, is I never want to sneak around or, hedge or lie to my parents, um, because I feel like that's going to always come back and get you. And for me, one of the most important things was trying to maintain a relationship of strong trust. Um, and again, this may be different in different situations because my dad has actually mentally been quite sharp and maybe a little bit less so right now, but he's still pretty with it. And he would eventually know if I tried to lie to him about different things. So I think it's different depending on what the mental
Yeah.
state is, but that's been something that's been pretty important, is trying to build that trust. And for me, part of it was just recognizing that it was going to be a really long-term, regular, not insignificant time commitment.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is disrupted a lot of things. I mean, and I don't think any of us begrudge that, but it's just had to shift, and we're fortunate the communities that we're part of understand, and neither of us have been like on our A game in every part of our life the last month, but that's that's how life and the rhythm goes. Um, if you had to say a few things to help others that are going through this, maybe at a certain, whatever level or part of the journey they're at, What would you tell other children of parents who are having this conversation?
Yeah. Well, it's just really hard. Acknowledge to yourself that it's just really hard. But I think too, for me, a really important point came maybe a year and a half ago, when I just finally kind of gave up is the wrong word. But it's a little bit that, like, I finally kind of surrendered to the idea that I was going to be able to talk my parents into anything. And I sort of found my peace with the path that they had chosen for themselves, knowing that it could lead to really bad outcomes, but that I had done everything that I could to try to, make those outcomes as good as possible. And the rest was sort of, you know, up to God, up to them.
Yeah. More than one occasion, we knew that people wanted us to make them do something, and they were still at a stage where we couldn't do that. We didn't feel like with good conscience, and we weren't going to try to take over their lives.
No.
But we also would say to ourselves, we're waiting for the next thing to happen.
Yeah.
And that was really hard. But you're right. I think it was like, okay, this is where we are. The story right now, other than, your dad at this stage of his life, and we're seeing the end of that time coming, they have made this shift into an assisted living that, 8 days in, they seem pretty happy, cranky about the right things and appropriately shifting and struggling. So hopefully it's ended in the way that we wanted it to. But yeah, it's been hard. So I do love that every time we leave, your dad thanks you for thank you for your service.
Every time.
Every time. It's very sweet. Very sweet. But all right. Well, so if any of you are, going through this, just know that it's not easy. Give yourself permission to not be on top of everything, because my last month, my word has been discombobulated, and I haven't been as efficient or as complete as I needed to be. But that's life, and you hopefully are surrounded by communities that will support you through it. All right, thanks, son. We're going to end our time by totally plugging our book. Rule number 2, don't be an asshat, an official handbook for raising parents and children. And at the end of each episode, we're going to talk about one chapter. The format of the book is that we wrote, about 101 rules that we wanted to pass on to our children. Everything from things as important as seeking justice and finding your voice, to farting, making guacamole. It doesn't really matter what order those are in, but so it's everything. So we're going to take on, it was Mom's choice today, which chapter we're going to look at. So what are we looking at today, Robin?
Rule number 7, share your parents.
Oh, share your parents. And this is one that Robin wrote. So without having to read the whole thing, what's the gist of share your parents?
The gist of it, and this was probably a lot more important when the kids were little, but the gist of it is that your parents are not just your parents. They're parents of your community. So they're also shared with classmates. They're shared with soccer team members. They're shared with neighborhood kids. They're shared in whatever sense that makes sense to be shared.
Yeah, I know that for sometimes people in the helping professions, like pastors and teachers and doctors, the danger is that you share yourself so much with this other place that it's not really sharing, right? It's like one place is taking you away from your kids. How do you think we've managed, I think, to not do that?
Well, I think part of it is we've both been very involved with activities that the kids themselves were involved in. So, one of the things in the can we really call it a chapter when it's one page?
Yes.
Okay, sure.
It's a long book. It's 115 chapters. Damn it.
There's a little bit in there about, thanks for being patient while I went to boring meetings, which isn't true. They weren't really very patient, but
So the book is actually filled with lies about parenting. Great.
No,
Awesome.
it was more like, this is what we should do. But anyway, a lot of it was doing those things for the community while the kids were also part of the community. So, they also benefited. But I think we framed it that this is part of our duty and our responsibility, not in a heavy negative way, but just this is how we all live into the better community for everyone. Even if it's, driving everybody home after an outing and you're the last one always to get home because 4 other kids have to be taken home before you.
I found that one of the important things is to stay a little bit of aware of relationships so that we don't bring kids into the circle that maybe they're not getting along with very well. I know that there have been times where it's like, okay, we'll take them, but I don't like them. And so like once or twice, I think it's really good to kind of model being above that, but making sure that we don't invite social drama into their life that they didn't want. I know that I try to really like, okay, how are you doing with so and so before we invite them to this? I think kind of staying on top of what's going on with them is also really important. I'm trying to think if they ever felt like we got taken away. I know when I was serving an office in the church when they were young, I was gone a lot. And so I missed, a significant part of a couple of years of school where I don't even remember where I was. And our youngest brings that up every once in a while. Whatever. But I think for the most part, we've been pretty good about it. Right?
Yeah, you can ask that same question when you talk to the kids.
That's true. I'm just going to say we've been excellent at it. And I do think we are often one of the houses that people hang out with or come to. And I always want us to be that house that people can just hang out at and not feel like they have to call us Mr. or Mrs. whatever. So good. Well, there's our chapter on sharing your parents. We'd encourage you to buy the book, basically. So we are coming to the end of our first episode. Woo-woo! Drop down all the sound bites of celebration. Next week, I'll be back with one of the children as yet to have been scheduled and named. But I will talk with them. Thanks, honey, for hanging out with me at our kitchen table.
Anytime.
Now we gotta go make dinner and figure out what we're gonna do. I don't know what we're gonna do for dinner tonight.
Whatever.
We'll eat something. I'm sure there's something in the fridge. Anyway, so thanks for joining us today on this episode of the RCP Family Podcast. Okay, now Rob, you're going to read that.
The whole thing?
No, just take a pause and then read that.
Oh, okay. Thank you for listening to the RCP Family Podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at RCP Family and on Facebook at RCP Family Podcast. Also, please subscribe, rate, review, and share this show wherever you listen to podcasts, except for iTunes. And lastly, don't forget to pick up our parenting book, Rule Number 2, Don't Be an Asshat, an official handbook for raising parents and children, available in print and Kindle edition. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.